Hello everyone, welcome to TFT 12 for T21 aspirants. How is everyone doing? We hope you are doing great and eager to start sociological thinkers. But before that, we have to cover the last TFT for research methods and analysis. That is why we chose a Saturday to post this TFT. We wish everyone good health and an enjoyable journey with us. Today's TFT is on topic 3, subtopic B, which is techniques of data collection. We are covering the secondary sources today. We have already covered the primary sources. We will also give an introduction to topic 3C. There are few concepts that you need to study, so we will be covering them also. Let's take a quick recap of the methods that we have studied till now. We have studied research methods under primary sources. They are given here. For example, we studied about sampling, case studies, life histories, pilot studies, social surveys, questionnaires, interviews, observations, participant observation and longitudinal research. You need to remember the definitions of each method and the procedure involved. You also need to know the stand or the viewpoints of the positivists and the non-positivists. And lastly, the advantages and disadvantages of each method should be on your fingertips. If any one of you is new here, we welcome you to this initiative of ours, which is Task for Today, TFT for short. We are covering sociology syllabus topic wise. We started from topic 1 of paper 1. We have covered the first 2 topics of paper 1 and today we will be completing topic 3. We will start sociological thinkers next week. So, let's begin today's task. What are secondary sources? Secondary sources are data that have already been produced. That means, if I as a sociologist, I am conducting certain research and I am taking the help of secondary sources, then this study has not been done by me, but I am taking the study or the research document which has been produced by some other sociologist or some other social researcher. This can be in the form of some government documents, some company documents, or research conducted by individuals, some personal documents. Also, existing sociological studies, the studies which are being conducted now, if I use them, I take the help of them, then they become a source of secondary research. Okay? Now, in secondary sources also, there are 2 types. One is for quantitative research and the other is for qualitative research. Quantitative research, the secondary source can be government statistics. For example, census report, right? If I am using the census report or socioeconomic data, or I need something related to caste or economic condition, if I am taking the help of census, then it becomes a secondary source for me because I am not conducting the census. In qualitative sources, we have letters and diaries. Now you should understand that secondary sources can be historical, sometime in the past when I was not even born, or something in the contemporary, that means in the modern world. Anything that I choose will be a secondary source for me if I have not conducted the research. Now, why should we go for secondary sources? Why not primary source? Because primary source will be conducted by me, so that will be more reliable, isn't it? Why should I go for secondary sources? There are many reasons. Firstly, because they save time and money. I do not have to invest much time. I do not have to spend time and money. And I simply have to take the document from some archives or library or museum, and then I will get the required data that I need for my research. Another point is that the data, let's say, which I want to observe or which I need is beyond my scope. For example, sometime in the past maybe, or maybe in some remote area where it is not possible for me to go there. Probably some place in Africa I want to study the African tribes. Then I will take some study or some research on aboriginals, right? Also, another point which is similar to this is there are fewer problems of access. Right, that is why I need secondary sources, because they are now easily available. You must also know about online libraries where they keep all the research material, right? So it is very much easier for me to take the help of all these researches which have been done by other sociologists, other social researchers. Also, another very important point is that now I will not face any ethical problem, because whatever is in the public, any data which is already in the public has gone through the scrutiny of ethics and morality, right? So I do not have to worry about this, and I simply have to go and collect this data. It is already under public eye. The last point is that it is possible for me to study past studies. For example, I want to study a primitive society or slave society or feudal society. Then I will simply go to the data, go to the archives, go to perhaps some historical document, and then I will take the help of them and I will formulate a theory. The secondary sources that we are going to study today are official statistics, census report, for example, then any historical sources, life documents, and content analysis. This consists of your TFT 12. First one is official statistics. They cover a wide range of topics. For example, demography. Demography is related to population, because ultimately we as sociologists, we are studying the population, the people, as well as the social structure, social institutions, but people constitute a very important part of sociology. Then we may also study about crime, delinquency, any deviance, employment, unemployment, industrial relations, industrial workers, unorganized labor, educational achievements, stratification, family life, divorce. All these things come under the purview of sociology. So official statistics help us in reaching to all these sections of the data, right? These are in our reach, these are accessible. Now the next comes statistical surveys. This is very important because census document, it is a treasure for us researchers. They give a lot of information which we require, and we do not have to ask anyone, we do not have to go door to door, and we simply have to seek the permission of the government perhaps and some officials, and then we will get the document that we are doing some research on this particular topic, and then we can form different patterns, maybe some cause and effect relationships we can form, and then we can arrive at a conclusion. The next point is the advantages of official statistics. What are the advantages? First point, as already understood, that they are easily accessible everywhere, even on online, right? And they are quite thorough, that means quite detailed, right? Many aspects are there. You can see charts and charts. Even in economic survey, you must have seen towards a as a supplement they are given, there are different charts, and sometimes you may feel that why they have given so many charts, they are so boring, but they are very useful for researchers. Okay. The next point is that OS or official statistics, they include the whole of the population. This is very, very important because now a sample size has increased, right? Sample size is equal to the population. And another point is the participant, everyone, that is the whole nation, will be a participant to this census, right? Because it is legally compulsory. Therefore, there are no persons who are coming and saying that I will not participate, or I am ill, or I am this or that. There are no excuses, and everyone has to participate. Not like the other methods that we saw where people were suddenly saying that they were reluctant and they did not want to take part in the survey, but here they have no scope of excuse. Here you will see the example of Durkheim. He studied suicide and he took the help of official statistics and he found them both valid as well as reliable. You remember reliability and validity? Reliable means replication is easy. There is a constancy, right? Even different people or different researchers, when they look at the same data, they will come at the same conclusion. And what is valid? They show the picture of a social reality, and this will be very closer to what can be found on ground, right? So for Durkheim, official statistics was a source for both reliability and validity. the next point, still we have certain disadvantages also for official statistics, because there are some areas where the reliability and validity is questionable, where when we deal with the topic of crimes, because they may not be reported. You must know that, for example, if we take the example of rape, okay, not everyone who has undergone rape or who is a victim of rape or who has committed rape will report that they have done this and this, right? So in crimes, we cannot be 100% sure that every crime has been reported or every crime has been recorded, right? So here you will find that the self-report studies and victim studies may not be entirely reliable. Self-report means anyone who has committed crime, he or she may not confess that I have committed crime. Similarly, someone who has undergone, who is a victim, he or she may not come out because of embarrassment or shame or stigma which is attached to that particular crime. Also, there are certain surveys or questionnaires where people will not respond, so even sampling will not be accurate. When participants reduce, then the sampling also, the quality of data which comes is not that much reliable, and the sampling gets affected because sample does not represent the population. Similarly, some people may lie, some people may hide or exaggerate. They may not be crime, but still they report that yes, it is a crime. Some may forget. And lastly, there is a role of researcher also, because the researcher is finally the one who is interpreting the crime, and he or she is the one who is choosing the offenses that he or she will study. So this subjective factor is also there. Now there are two viewpoints for official statistics. The first one is given by phenomenologists, and they are, you remember, they are non-positivists, right? Remember here what they say about crime. They say that all the crime statistics are invalid. They do not represent the social reality. Why? Because not everyone reports crime. The person who is doing it, the perpetrator or the victim, they do not report every crime. Okay. Also, what they say is that it is a product of categorization. If I categorize something as a suicide, as a rape, or another, for example, theft, dacoity, anything, any deviance, it is up to me, it is up to the researcher who is keeping or categorizing them, right? Placing it under certain categories. For example, for suicide, I am saying that it should fall under these particular criteria. So if one of the characteristic does not match, or 2-3 characteristic does not match, that I might say that it is not suicide. But in reality, from another perspective, it might be a suicide. Therefore, this categorization process is subjective, as it is elaborated here on the next point, that it is based on subjective classifications. So the phenomenologists, they say that it is up to man. Remember, how does he construct social reality? On the basis of common sense, everyday life. So man is the creator of social reality. Therefore, if I as a researcher, I create something for him, if I categorize it or I define suicide for him, then it may not be agreeable by this particular person or any other person. Now, what do the conflict theorists view? Conflict theory, remember, they come under the positivists, right? So what do they say? They say that the official statistics, they are a product of inequalities in power. How come? Because ultimately the official statistics is maintained by the higher authorities, isn't it? Maybe someone from the lower position, he or she may be compiling the report, but ultimately it will go to the higher authority in order to get the approval. So there may be certain manipulations, right? The collection procedures and definitions are manipulated. Whatever the higher authorities will say that this should be the definition of this particular social aspect, or this should be the procedure, then they have to follow it. Also, there are certain frequent redefinitions. If you keep on defining or redefining something, then that particular definition or that particular concept is not reliable. One cannot say that it is consistent, right? Also, the categories which are used, they are questionable. there may not be any basis to these categories which are being given. And lastly, the official statistics, it reflects the ideological frameworks. Anything, any method, let's say, the basis will be a philosophy or an ideology, right? So in this method, what happens, official statistics, because everything is under the control of the authorities, therefore they have an inclination or bias towards certain ideology, and this cannot be avoided. This is inherent in this particular method. Second method is historical sources. Historical sources, you must be knowing about historical sources, anything like, for example, books, any text or scriptures, anything from the past which tells us about the history, about the social conditions, about the polity. So what do they define? They will help us in understanding the long-term social changes, because society ultimately has evolved, has changed, and that is why we have a modern society. If there was no social change, then we would still be in the primitive society. So if society has changed, that means there have been certain social changes, and these social changes are enumerated or listed here in the historical sources, and by studying them over a period of time, we can understand the long-term social changes. What consists of historical sources? For example, parliamentary investigations, some diaries of important people, letters, autobiographies, historical speeches, mass media reports, all these come under historical sources. You must remember that most of these will be in the past. Okay, that is why they are historical. What happens here? Is there any disadvantage? Yes, there is a problem of reliability and validity, because here they are, first of all, qualitative sources, right? They reflect the subjective views of the one who produced them. Therefore, a person is involved, his viewpoint is there, his thinking, his social condition, his upbringing, everything is included in that particular source. Therefore, it might not be reliable as well as valid. It might not show the exact social picture of that time. And also, if another person sees it, then he may have a different observation. Therefore, it has lesser reliability and lesser validity. The next method is life documents. These are written by individuals and they record subjective states. Because we are telling, if you are asked to describe your life, how are you going to say? Are you going to say x plus y or 2 is equal to 2? No. You will describe about your childhood, your influences, your ideologies, your perhaps childhood idols, adulthood, adolescence, everything you are going to describe, you are going to write in words. Probably you will write a diary, sort of journal writing, daily writing, or some letters you must be having, you must have written to your friends, or you must be having certain photographs. You went to your village, you had taken certain photographs, or someone might have written about you few lines, then that comes under your biography, or some memoirs, anything worth remembering. Or if some crime has been committed by a certain person, then even that suicide note will come as a life documents, because it documents the death of the person. And lastly, there are certain films that are, you must have heard about different biopics which describe the life of important people, for example, sports people. Then we have politicians, then someone from the art. All these films, they describe the life of a person, therefore they come under the life documents. What are the advantages of life documents? They give an insight into the people's subjective status. So they will be very much favored by the non-positivists, because they can see inside a person's mind. What was he thinking? What was he opposing? What was his viewpoint? What was saddening him? Why was he happy? What was the cause of his happiness? Anything. Okay. So this is mainly favored by the symbolic interactionists, because they give an insight into the personal meanings that that person associated with, right? For example, a token of love. Then what was the meaning that this person thought of? Perhaps he was very happy. He wrote a letter to his loved. All these things will come under life documents. Also, there was perhaps an image boost. There was a morale booster because that person had a certain success, had a certain advancement in career. All these things will come under life documents. Therefore, it is favored by symbolic interactionists. But there are certain disadvantages also. What are these disadvantages? They are given by Plummer, that they may not be representative. Why? Because there is an element of subjectivity. There is an element of interpretation. So, they may or may not represent the social reality. So, what happens? If something is not representing the social reality, then it is less valid. It scores less on the validity point, right? Validity is less because he or she is influenced by the identity. For example, if someone is an artist or someone is a scientist, both will have a different identity, and whatever they write, the perspective will be influenced by art. His or her perspective will be influenced by science. So this identity is very much important. Also, the intended readers. For example, if I write something for school kids, I will write in a different language than if I am writing for my colleagues. So, one cannot say on the basis of my writing that my writing will be static or like this only. No, it will change on the basis of the audience or the readers. The last method is mass media and content analysis. Pawson gives 4 ways to analyze the mass media content. He says the first type of analysis is formal content analysis. What is formal content analysis? Here I simply classify the content and I count it, right? For example, I am reading a storybook, and a children's storybook may be a classic, and then I find out that different children, for example girls and boys, they are adopting different gender roles. For example, sometimes a boy or the kid is becoming a doctor, or he is becoming perhaps a scientist. He is actually donning the role of a scientist. He is not actually a scientist. That kid is playing the role of a scientist. So I will simply count the incidents, the number of times that these gender roles or this gender activity is taking place. So this is very quantitative, right? Only quantifying or counting the content will not give me much information. If someone else is reading my record or research, he or she may not understand what I am trying to infer, what I am trying to tell the person. The next point is thematic analysis. It is a bit elaborate, because here what happens, I examine a topic and look for the messages that lie behind the coverage. Just like in reading comprehension, what happens? Let's say you are given a passage and you have to find out what is the theme of the passage. So what is actually the author trying to convey, what theme it is? For example, is it related to women empowerment? Is it related to certain philosophy? Is it related to courage? Is it related to gratification? So what is the theme? What is something which is not explicitly said, but actually every passage or every paragraph, every word of the passage is conveying, is pointing towards this particular topic. That is known as theme. So what do? I take that passage or writing or mass media content, and what do? I will go for look at the topic, and then I will look at the messages which the mass media is trying to convey to the audience. The next point is textual analysis. So here I am going to go for every piece of the text. I will try to post-mortem it, you can say, go for a detailed analysis of small pieces of text, word by word. But there is a negative point, that my analysis will have certain subjectivity. My interpretation will be different from that of another researcher. Therefore, there is a high level of subjectivity and the reliability decreases in this particular method. The last point, audience analysis. It is important because here I am going to analyze how the audience interprets the message of the media. Do they get the message or not? This is important. For example, there is a play on child labor or child marriage. It is enacted very nicely and everyone is seeing it, but enjoyment does not mean that the audience knows or gets exactly the message which is being conveyed by that particular act. Therefore, it is very much important and there is a lot of subjectivity involved here. It will depend on the background of the audience, the age group of the audience, the gender of the audience. Only then they will interpret it, and that too there will be a lot of subjectivity because different age groups might see that same play differently. Now there is an assessment of the secondary sources. You have seen about the advantages and the disadvantages. Now how do we assess? How do we judge about the secondary sources? How reliable are they? How valid are they? This is given by John Scott. He gives 4 parameters to assess the secondary sources. They are first authenticity, credibility, representativeness and meaning. By authenticity, he means whether the document is complete and reliable. Only then will it be sound. Second point is whether it was written by the claimed author. If I say that I have written a particular document, then is it right? Am I telling the right? Am I being honest? Second point is credibility. It is measured by sincerity, whether the author intended to provide a true account, right? Or was trying to mislead. What is the reality here? How honest I am? It depends on my honesty. Next point is representativeness. It means if I have written a report on child labor, does it represent the social reality or does it hide certain characteristics? Therefore, this is a very important point for assessing the validity of a document, of a secondary source. The last point is meaning. That means the literal understanding. It involves the ability to read, decipher or translate. Because you must understand, if I take a document, if I want to read something from Germany and it has been translated by someone, if that person is not very much aware of sociology or does not have a good background of sociology, then there might be something missing, because word to word translation will not give me the meaning of the document or the original document. There should be someone who should give me the hidden meaning which was there in the original document. So simple translation will not do. The hidden meaning will also have to be included in order to interpret that particular document. So in the meaning, you will see that the interpretive understanding plays a very important role in assessing that particular secondary source. Therefore, authenticity, credibility, representativeness and meaning, these are the 4 parameters to judge any secondary source. Now I will give you a short introduction to topic 3C. Please open your sociological syllabus and you will find 3 concepts written there. First one is variables, second sampling, third hypothesis, fourth is reliability and fifth is validity. You will have to study all these concepts from Nitin Sangwan, chapter 3. We have covered sampling in quite detail in topic task for today 10. So I will not be covering them once again. These will be the concepts that you need to remember, and please add them to your glossary. First one is variables. What do you mean by variable? Variables measure a social construct. What does a social construct mean? Anything social variable that will be a, for example, social class, right? Age, gender, anything which changes. There are different parameters to define demography or population. For the population can be divided into social class, different age groups, certain gender. All these keep changing. There is no fixed social class. There is upper class, middle class, lower class. Age group, we have those who are kids, adolescents, adults, elderly people. Gender, we have male, female, others, transgender. So all these people are there and they are variables. These are the concepts, sociological constructs that we as sociologists or social researchers, we study them. They play a major role of reflecting the variation within a population. That is the role of social variables. There are two types which I have defined before: dependent and independent variable, right? For example, in suicide, Durkheim studied suicide. So what did he study? That suicide was dependent on certain social variables. So those social variables on which suicide dependent were the independent variables. So this study can be applied in various social studies. For example, if you have to study poverty, unemployment, what are the factors which are affecting poverty, unemployment? Those will be the independent variables. Next comes hypothesis. It is an untested statement about the relationship between concepts in a given theory. For example, remember about that apple which fell on the ground. So I guessed that apple fell because of gravity. So I know there is a correlation between that falling and gravity. So this is my hypothesis. Gravity is the cause and it is leading to falling, right? So this will be my hypothesis. There is a cause-effect relationship. That same cause-effect relationship can be applied in society also, in social studies also. For example, what is the cause of poverty? I will have certain factors. So I will perhaps choose one factor which I have to study and I will formulate a hypothesis, and then I will start conducting experiments, collect data, and finally come to a conclusion. I can do the same thing for unemployment also, for any crime also, for suicide also, anything, for divorce. I can do it for n number of studies. There is an element of deduction, you remember. We have a hypothesis, we conduct studies, that means we already guess, and we simply conduct studies to confirm. This is known as deduction. Therefore, hypothesis is mainly used in deduction. The next concepts are reliability and validity. Reliability means consistency or ability to replicate. Can the same result be produced again? So replication, you should remember, that same result will be arrived at when you conduct the same experiment, right? Therefore, there is a certain amount of consistency. There are two types. First one is temporal, second one is comparative. Temporal, that means even if time passes by, even if I conduct that same experiment, after 2 years, it will give me the same result. Similarly, comparative, I can compare on the basis of different variables. I will change the variables, then also it will remain consistent. What are these factors that I am going to change? I might change the test method, okay? I might change the target. I might change the observers. Anything that I change, it does not affect this, right? Now what happens in validity? In validity, what the test measures and how well it does so, you will find it in different entrance exam. For example, there is an entrance exam to test the economics or financial knowledge of the candidates. Then how well it does it depends on the question paper, on the questions which are being set, right? So if it includes questions from all chapters, conceptual, as well as factual, then I will call it a valid method. Similarly, it happens in social research also. We have certain types which I have already discussed before. There is something known as internal validity, another one is external validity, third one is measurement validity, and fourth one is ecological validity. So these are the different types of validity and you need to remember them. Any method, any sociological method will be judged on the basis of reliability and validity. Therefore, these two terms should be on your tips in any day. So now we have come to the end of topic 3, and topic 3b, that is the secondary sources, you will do from methodology chapter of Haralambous and Holborn, while topic 3c you will do from Nitin Sangwan chapter 3, all the concepts, right? The next topic, the next TFT will be on Karl Marx. We will be starting sociological thinkers. So you are advised to revise all the topics that you have done till now. All the best. Have a great day. Enjoy today's TFT.